Good morning all. This is Dr. D. Khalandar Basha, working as Associate Professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Dundigal, Hyderabad. Today we are going to discuss the definition and terminology related to Module 2, that is Interfacing Devices, under the course Microprocessor and Microcontrollers. Define an interrupt. Interrupt is a external signal which is informed to the CPU and important work has to be occurred. So if the processor is connected to a IO device, the processor is assigned some work to the IO device. The processor cannot wait until the completion of this IO task. So in that case, we can have the interrupt mechanism. So when the processor is given a task, so the IO device, it is going to execute its own operations. Meanwhile, the processor is going to execute its own operation. Whenever the task which is assigned by this IO device, if it is completed, then it is going to give a acknowledgement indicating the task assigned by the processor is terminated or closed. So it can go for handling those particular interrupts. So this interrupt usually given by the external devices, and we have a few instructions corresponding to internally. That means by generating few instructions. Explain internal and external interrupts. So the internal interrupts is initiated by some exceptional conditions caused by the program itself rather than by a external events. External interrupts are activated when signals are received at the inputs of the chip. The example for a software generated or internal interrupts is, so whenever you are divide any number with 0, so in that case it is going to generate an interrupt that will comes under internal interrupt. Similarly, if any interrupt is generated by using INT instruction, the various types, 256 types will be supported in 8086 processor. So this processor that is generating the interrupt by executing some instructions are called as internal interrupts. If any external device is given an interrupt request, those will be considered as external interrupts. What is an ISR? So ISR stands for Interrupt Service Register or routine. So whenever an interrupt occurred, it is served by executing the ISR. So if the processor is given with some interrupt request, so whatever the processor which is going to execute the program, that will be terminated the main program and it will be go to the ISR. That subroutine is corresponding to a particular kind of information. This in 8259, that is a PIC, we are going to have ISR. So whenever you have multiple interrupts, the 8086 processor is going to connect to the PIC, that is Programmable Interrupt Controller, where whatever the interrupt request which it is going to have, that it will be stored in a interrupt service register. What are the sources of interrupt? The sources of interrupt are hardware interfaces sources and software interrupt sources. If any interrupt is generated by the external device, that we can reflect on INTR signal. Whereas internally generated by executing a few instructions, that will call as software interrupts. So in 8086 processor, the classification will be takes place the software interrupts and hardware interrupts. Similarly, what are the interrupts which are generated? These again we can classify as maskable and non-maskable interrupts. The maskable interrupts are which we can ignore, whereas non-maskable interrupts are which we can't ignore. Immediately the ISR has to be executed for the corresponding interrupts. Next, define a baud rate and bit rate. Baud rate means number of symbols transmitted in 1 second. Bit rate means number of bits transmitted in 1 second. Next, define asynchronous communication. We have two types of communications, synchronous and asynchronous. Now we will see what is asynchronous communication. Asynchronous communication, the transmission of data generally without the use of the external clock signal, where the data can be transmitted intermittently rather than in a steady stream. So we can also consider the expectation of the arrival of the data is unknown in the asynchronous communication. List the characteristics of asynchronous communication. In asynchronous communication, variable bit rate need not maintain a constant phase difference. Next, handshaking method is used for transmitter need not to transmit the clock information along with the data bit stream. What are the various programmed data transfer methods? The various program data transfer methods are synchronous data transfer, asynchronous data transfer, interrupt driven data transfer. These are the various three mechanisms will be supported for data transfer. Next, what are the features of 8255? 8255 we can also call as PIO, that is Programmable Input Output Device, or PPI, Programmable Peripheral Interface. The 8255 interface device is consist of three 8-bit IO ports, namely port A, port B and port C, to enhance the flexibility of 825. It is a TTL compatibility, that is transistor logic. It has improved driving capability. These three ports, which are of 8 bits, so total 8 into 3, 24 IO pins we can see in 8255. Port A 02, port A7, that is 8 pins. Port B02, port B7, 8 pins. Port C02, port C7, 8 pins. These three ports are classified again into two groups. One is group A, another one is group B. Under group A, the port A and the port C upper pins, that is PC7 to PC4, are grouped as group A ports, whereas in group B, it is consist of port B and port C lower, that is PC3 to PC0. So in total, we are going to have 8 plus 4, 12 in each group. What is the use of 8251 chip? So 8251 is a USART, where USART stands for Universal Synchronous Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter. So Intel's 8251A is a Universal Synchronous Asynchronous Receiver and Transmitter. It is typically used for serial communication and it is compatible with Intel processors. So this 8251, mainly it will convert the data which is sent by the processor, which is in parallel form, into the serial data. So it will convert from parallel to serial. This will be transmitted on TXD line. Similarly, when the processor is receiving the data will be received serially on the RxD line. All the data, once it is captured and buffered inside of 8251, then it is going to be sent the data on the data bus as parallel. So 8251, which is nothing but USART, which is used for converting parallel to serial and serial to parallel communication. What are the functions performed by the port C of 8255? We know that 8255 is consist of three ports, port A, port B, port C. Now we will see the significance of port C. The port C pins are used for handshake signals. Port C can be used as an 8-bit parallel IO port in mode 0. It can be used as two number of 4-bit parallel ports in mode 0, that is port C upper and port C lower. Port C upper is from PC4 to PC7, port C lower is from PC0 to PC3. The individual pins of port C can be set or reset for various control applications. The 8255 we can use in two modes of operation. One is BSR mode and the one is IO mode, where BSR mode stands for bit set or reset mode. So in 8255, by using BSR mode, only we can set or reset the port pins of port C. What is the significance of C by D bar signal in 8251, that is USART? The C by D bar signal is used to select either control register for configuring or data bus buffer for read or write operation. So if C by D bar signal is equivalent to 1, it indicates it is control information. If C by D bar is equivalent to 0, it indicates the bus is consist of data information. The control information, it is mainly for configuring the internal registers of 8251, whereas data, whenever we are having, it is for transmitting or receiving the data that we are going to be communicate between the processor and 8251 to the external world. Next one is, what is synchronous data transfer? In synchronous data transfer, the sending and receiving units are enabled with same clock signal. In this, data will be transmitted in the form of blocks of frame. What is asynchronous data transfer? In most computers, asynchronous communication mode of data transfer is used, in which two components have different clocks. In this, data is transmitted in form of byte or character. Next one is, list different control words in 8251A. The control words of 8251A, which is USART, Universal Synchronous Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter, are divided into two functional types. One is mode instruction control word, the second one is command instruction control word. Apart from these two registers, the 8251 is also consist of the status register. What is the use of modem control unit in 8251? The modem control unit handles the modem handshake signal to coordinate the communication between the modem and the USART. So if the data transmission has to be takes place through the modem using the handshake signals, then we have the compatibility of 8251 with the modem control. What are the internal devices of a typical DAC? Where DAC stands for digital to analog converter. The internal devices of DAC will be vary by using a different mechanisms for converting the digital to analog conversion. One of the method mainly used is R2R, ladder resistive network, an internal latch, and current to voltage converting amplifier. Next, define settling time in DAC, that is digital to analog converters. The time taken by the DAC to convert a digital data to corresponding analog signal is called as settling time. What are the different types of ADC, that is analog to digital conversion? The different types of ADCs are successive approximation ADC, counter type ADC, flash type ADC, integrator converters, and voltage to frequency converters. These are the various methods which we can use for converting an analog signal into digital signal. What is handshake port? In handshake port, signals are exchanged between I/O device and port or between ports and the processor for checking or information of various condition of the device. So example, in 8255 we have few handshake signals like input buffer full, output buffer full. Similarly, strobe signal, next acknowledgement signal, then interrupt signal. These are the few examples for the handshake signals. So whenever the data is reading by the IO device, first IO device will be store the data input into input buffer pool. So once the input buffer is full, then it will give a interrupt to the processor indicating the data is ready, so the processor can read the data. Similarly, when the processor wants to write the data to the IO device, first the processor will write the data into the latches of the 8255. Once the data is latched into the output buffer, it will give a signal to the IO device so that the data will be captured by the IO device. After receiving, it will give a acknowledgement. Next one is, what is a programmable peripheral device? If the functions performed by a peripheral device can be altered or changed by a program instruction, then the peripheral device is called programmable peripheral device. Usually, the programmable devices will have the control registers through which we can program them. The device can be programmed by sending the control word in the prescribed format to the control register. Next, what is the need of a port? The IO devices are generally slow devices compared to 8086 processor and another processor, and their timing characteristics do not match with processor timings. Hence, the IO devices are connected to the system bus through the ports. What are the operating modes of 8255? That is programmable peripheral interface for a port A. The port A of 8255 can be programmed in any one of the modes as input or output port. That is mode 0, which is simple IO mode, mode 1 handshake IO mode, mode 2 bidirectional IO port with handshake signals. Next one, what are the functions performed by port C of 8255? The port C pins are used for handshake signals in few modes. Port C can be used as 8-bit parallel IO port in mode 0, and it can be used as two number of 4-bit parallel ports in mode 0. The individual pins of port C can be set or reset for various control applications. The port C will be used as a handshake signals for mode 1 and mode 2. What is the significance of C by D bar signal in 8251? The C by D bar signal is used to select either control register for configuring or data bus buffer for read and write operations. What are the different types of methods used for a data transmission? The data transmission between 2 points involves unidirectional or bidirectional transmission of meaningful digital data through a medium. There are three methods of data transmission: simplex, duplex, and half-duplex. In the simplex method, from device 1 to device 2, we can have the data transfer. No data will be transferred from D2 to D1 device. Whereas in duplex, we are going to be transmit the data between D1 and D2, where the transmission of data as well as receiving of the data will be takes place at the same time. Whereas in off duplex, it is also bidirectional one, that is the device 1 will communicate or the transmit the data to D2, as well as device 2 also will send the data to device 1, but only one device can transmit at a time. Whereas in full duplex, we are going to have both transmission as well as receiving at the same time. So if you observe the bus architecture of duplex and full duplex, the buses are dedicated for transmission and receiving in full duplex. Whereas in off duplex, only one bus will be there that we can use for both input as well as IO port. The advantage of half duplex is the number of bus which we require is less. Whereas full duplex, the transmission will be takes place at the same time. Thank you. So in this session, we have discussed definitions and terminology related to module 2, that is interface devices. Under this unit, we are going to study the memory interface and peripherals like 8255 and USA ART. Thank you all.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.